Now, usually we're pretty tough on the president on this show. We've lost a good deal of Democratic viewers based on that. But today we're going to do a very rare Barack Obama Department of Defense, because somebody's got to defend him about this speech in Syria. And the reason we're doing it is because I believe that 90% of the speech was right. And of course, almost all of Washington has missed it. So let me show you a piece of the speech that I agree with.
Over the last few days, we've seen some encouraging signs, in part because of the credible threat of U.S. military action, as well as constructive talks that I had with President Putin. The Russian government has indicated a willingness to join with the international community in pushing Assad to give up his chemical weapons.
Now, look, that's true. If we didn't say, hey, we're coming in and we're about to bomb any day, do you think Assad would have raised his hand and be like, oh, right here, I've got chemical weapons. I'd love to sign the chemical weapons treaty, which I haven't signed in all these years, even though 98% of the world has. And could you please take my chemical weapons off my hands? Of course he wouldn't have said that. Now, to say that, hey, you know what? He threatened force, and that was a bad thing. But wait a minute, he didn't use force. If you're on the left side, you should be happy that he didn't use force. And apparently, he did a deft, diplomatic maneuver where he threatened it enough without actually using it to get the results he wants, which is to get the chemical weapons out of Syria. And if you're on the right-wing side and you say, I should have struck, that's ridiculous. But wait a minute. The goal was to make sure that Assad didn't use chemical weapons again. If he doesn't have them, he can't use them. So I know that Obama has a propensity to split the baby. But in this case, splitting the difference is the right move. If he didn't threaten force, he wouldn't have gotten the result. But if he had been like Cheney and threatened force and then immediately used it, well, it would have been dumb, because here we have a diplomatic out that we should use, where we get to the goal that we want without war. So I think people are being fundamentally unfair to President Obama regarding this speech and regarding his policy. Now, yes, he might have stumbled into it with John Kerry's hypothetical question, but nonetheless, it is the right policy. So now here comes the overwhelming criticism from the media nonetheless. John Dickerson first starts out with something that's fairly reasonable. He says, President Obama's Syria speech felt like his Syria policy has at times. He was following through just because he had made a commitment. Now, look, that's a fair criticism. He had promised to do this speech a while back. Now, instead of turning it into a war speech, which is what he was going to do, he's turned it into, well, war if we have to. Diplomacy is what we would prefer, and it looks like we have an opportunity to do that. I agree with this speech. Yes, he followed through on the speech just because he had planned it, but so what, right? Now we go on to Ross Brooke, who writes, my fellow Americans, I need some new speechwriters, or at least a copy editor, to make sure part 2 of the speech doesn't contradict part 1. Now, if they're referring to the America's not the world's police, I've already shown, yes, that was contradictory. But I don't think that's what she's referring to. I think what they're referring to here is, oh, in the first part, I said war, and then the second part, I said we don't need war. I know, but we don't need the war because we threaten the war. If threatening the war is a ruse for actually starting the war, like Bush and Cheney did, that's a bad thing. If threatening the war is done in good, earnest effort to avoid the war, which is apparently what we've done here, then that's a good thing. Please use your judgment. Use common sense. Don't just be anti-Obama, pro-Democrat, anti-Democrat. Look at what he's saying. Look at the results that we've gotten. And I don't think the media is doing that in this case. Here comes Rick Klein. Obama tested the limits of his powers of persuasion, then he found them. Like, haha, he couldn't convince us of this. He couldn't convince us of what? Not to go to war with Syria? Check, we're convinced. Now, initially, he was saying we were going to go in that direction. But then he changed his mind based on the facts on the ground. We're supposed to reward that, say, hey, thank you for asking for congressional authorization. Thank you for noticing that you can get a peace deal without bombing. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. Please have human judgment. All of Washington is one giant groupthink. Obama, so he is weak, he is floundering, and this is not the correct thing. We must criticize Obama no matter what. Jesus, now look at Philip Gurwitch here. We have Obama because he can speak as few can, and we've hit that bad moment where he gives a speech that just makes it worse. I just don't see how it makes it worse. In Washington, once you say something, you have to always stick with it. Facts be damned. If he said we were going to bomb in the beginning and this was supposed to be a bombing speech, then damn it to hell, it should be a bombing speech. What? None of you have a human mind where you can say, oh, we were supposed to bomb until they said they would give us everything we want. Then we don't need to bomb. Oh, no, flip-flop. Ha-ha, in Washington, flip-flop, flip-flop. We got them. You didn't get anybody. You're being a jackass. There's many reasons to criticize this president. This isn't one of them. I think this was actually a rare bit of good diplomacy and a fairly good result. Use your mind if you have one.